Um, so Rob is a magical, mythical creature on our committee, to say the least. He has the best dance moves and also just has a wild sense of he has a wild sense of wonder about him, not only with like just life in general, but with the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and very wise in his sobriety. And it's been awesome to be around him because he shows up. He makes commitments. I mean, we met him at an assembly, and he was a GSR, and he just got involved. He was just a random guy, heard about YPA, and he's like, I'm about it. Let's talk about it. And just got involved. And it's been amazing to have him on the bid and on the host. And he's just an amazing person. And so I'm really excited for you guys to hear this, because as Robert says, most of the day he just thinks about himself. So here's Robert.
Thank you very much, Kyle. I appreciate that. My name is Robert. I'm an alcoholic. I'm from Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I'm here at the behest of SERCYPAA, the Southeast Regional Conference of Young People in AA, which is being held this year in Norfolk, Virginia, August 29th to September 1st. So everyone's welcome to come out. It should be a great time. But I usually like to start off shares anytime I speak with a prayer. But since this is going to be a shorter speaking session rather than a full meeting, I'm going to shorten it down a little bit and just do a quick God help. That's good enough. I think my higher power appreciates brevity. So again, my name is Robert. I'm an alcoholic, and I am glad to be here. Kyle mentioned it, but one of my favorite things is talking about myself. And the only thing I love more than that is having other people listen. So this is really great for me. I was thinking a little bit about what I wanted to share tonight, trying not to overthink it too much. And one of the things that was asked is experience, strength, and hope. And again, we only have time for about a third of a full speaker session, and so the idea that came to me was hope. And I see that in the background of one of our participants today is that word right there up at the top. And so I'll just see that it's a nice little sign. For me, I was one of those alcoholics that I started drinking at the age of 19, and I started drinking because I was looking for something and I didn't know what. I searched all over for it. I tried to find it in people. I tried to find it in TV shows. I tried to find it in food and video games. It just felt like something was missing from life. And it wasn't until I discovered alcohol that I felt like I had found it. I felt like here was the solution to life. Here was the thing that finally just made life worth living. It seemed to solve all my problems. And as with most things, especially great things, I wanted more of it. And what it first started as just the occasional Friday or Saturday, within a couple of weeks turned into every Friday or Saturday. Within a couple of weeks turned into Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And within a year, it was drinking every night because, again, it was the only way I knew how to live. And things kind of escalated really fast and then leveled off a bit. And for me, it turned into a just sitting at home every day after work, drinking alone, and eventually, progressed to the drinking throughout the night, drinking in the morning, drinking on the way to work, drinking at work. Not because suddenly everything was a party, but because by that point, I needed alcohol just to survive, just to get through the day, just to try not to throw up. I had gotten past the idea of even feeling normal anymore and just didn't want to feel terrible. And I was fighting a losing battle. And, anytime I think of hope, I think of a point close to the end. I don't know the exact day, probably within the last month of my drinking. I was living with my parents at this point. I was about 30 years old. And we had a little get together. It was like 8, 9 o'clock at night. I was very drunk, and maybe it was an intervention. I don't know. It was rather unsuccessful, but I just remember sitting down with my parents, and my mom asked me, she's, what's going on? Why are you drinking yourself to death? Not the exact word she used, but she wanted to know what was behind all of this. And I was honest with her for the first time ever. Uh, I wasn't angry. I didn't throw it at her. I was defeated, and I just told her. I said, I just don't want to live anymore, and I haven't wanted to live for a while, because that's where alcohol took me. And it had taken me there many times, and by the end, it was pretty constant that I just did not want to live anymore. Didn't see the point. And one of the things I'll say is, I haven't had a drink in more than 4 years. But on top of that, I also haven't wanted to be dead. I also haven't wanted to end all of this in more than 4 years. And that is just as much a miracle to me as not wanting to take a drink. So that was not the end of my story. That was not my last drink. I went on to have more drinks after that night because there was no solution there. There was a small admitting of what the problem was, as much as I could grasp at the time. But that was it. No solution. And so eventually, like I said, about a month after that, I finally hit a surrender point at the same time that, again, part of a solution was offered to me. My mom came in one morning when I was very sick. I love how the big book talks about approaching the alcoholic when they're at, right after a binge, right when they're the most shaky and desperate. And that was my story. I don't think she had read it in the book. She just came to it intuitively. And she just came in one morning as I was shaking between vomiting and just asked if I would go to the hospital just to get checked out. It doesn't have to be a long-term solution. I don't have to stop drinking. None of that. She's like, let's just make sure that you're going to be okay physically. And I said, okay. I accepted help, and I went to the hospital, and I got help, and the hospital suggested rehab. They didn't push me into it. They didn't force me, but they just suggested it. And again, my mother, she, for whatever reason, she had the perfect words. She just said, don't worry about your job. Don't worry about the debts you owe. Don't worry about any of that. It doesn't matter what this costs. We'll figure it out. She said, if you want to go, go. And we'll work out all the details. Very much a YPAW attitude. She was like, just get in the car. That's all that matters. That's one of the things I love about this YPAW community is that same kind of attitude. And she also told me that if I wanted to go home and start drinking again, I could do that too. She's like, it is up to you. And boy, that's what I needed to hear. Because if anybody had tried to push me into this, I would have pushed back twice as hard, because not only am I selfish and self-centered, I am stubborn. And so I went to rehab. And in rehab, we had the opportunity for a family counseling session. I had a therapist in there for the 4 weeks. And so one day they got my parents in there, and we had a little session, and it went great. And I don't know. I don't remember anything that was said, but everyone seemed happy at the end of it. But one of the things at the end, he asked, he said, do you have any questions? My mom said, what about his suicidal tendencies? She said, he said that he didn't want to live anymore. She said something to the effect of, is that fixed too? And he kind of chuckled, and he just looked at her and he said, your son was never suicidal. She said, he was just hopeless. And, I love that. I remember that to this day, because again, that summed it up. The reason I didn't want to live at the end, and for the last couple of years at the end, was because I saw no hope in living. I had found one solution to life, and that was alcohol. And that solution was not only killing me, it was causing me to do things that I regretted. It was causing me to lie and cheat and steal. It's causing me to, like, I couldn't even hold down a job. I couldn't be I was gonna say successful member of society. I couldn't even be like a normal member of society. I could, I kept moving the bar lower and lower, and like a good game of limbo, I just kept sliding under it. And so I'm very grateful to that rehab, because the other thing that they did for me was they suggested that I read the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was my introduction to this program. I read the book, and I found myself on every page. I loved it. And at the end of rehab, I even recommended it again to my parents. I just said, hey, if you want to know who I am in words better than I can explain it, read this book. And I remember feeling very vulnerable in that moment, because it really did feel like telling somebody to read my diary. because that's how I felt about it. It's how I still feel about it. I still try and read the big book every day because I find truth in there. I find inspiration. Uh, it is not my solution today, but it is like a treasure map. It points towards my solution, and I need that, as I need many other things. Uh, yeah. So when I got out of rehab, I didn't do it perfect. I made a lot of mistakes, but the thing that I am grateful for is that looking back now, I can see how every time I was willing to come back, every time I was willing to admit where I'd been wrong, every time that I was willing to get back into the work, it worked. It really did. Uh, you know, continually, this program has proven to me that my way of living was unsuccessful. My way of living was the same way of living that needed alcohol to as a crutch just to get through. The big book talks about that feeling of restlessness, irritability, discontentment, and unless I can once again feel that ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a drink. And the amazing thing is, since coming here and since doing the work, since doing the steps, since trying to live by these principles in everything that I do, not just in meetings, but in work and in family. Kyle mentioned that I show up, and sometimes showing up is literally the most I can do is just show up somewhere and pretend like I want to be there. And that has even made all the difference with my family. And they've seen it in the big things and in the little things. And I'm grateful for that. But yeah, I feel like I was going somewhere with all that, and I lost that thread, but that's all right. Sometimes God does that for me and does that for y'all as well. I will talk for a minute or two about YPAW specifically. My main home group here is the Annie Langs meeting. It's not a young people's group. It meets Sunday nights, and it was born out of COVID. We're having our 4-year anniversary this Sunday, and we started out by just meeting in a park because that's the most we could do when everything shut down. But I had the opportunity last August to be part of a handful of people to help form our first young people's meeting here in Fredericksburg, Virginia, since COVID. We had one before everything shut down, and then it didn't come back. And so through getting involved with the SERCYPAA bid, and then also our Virginia State Conference of Young People, and then now being on host for SERCYPAA as well, I was able to see what YPAW, what the young people community brings to AA. And I'm grateful for that experience because it's really helped to widen what I see. I've had periods in my recovery. I like to think everybody goes through this, but mostly that's just because it makes me feel better. I've had periods in my recovery where I felt like if you're not doing it my way, you're doing it wrong. That's not limited to my recovery. It's really just throughout my entire life. I have felt that about everything. But things like coming to these young people events and being part of the planning of them, especially, has helped me to see all of the different ways that these things can be done. And, to kind of tie it back into that idea of hope, I've never seen the kind of energy that is in these YPAW meetings, is these YPAW conferences, just a group of young people outside one of their meetings, before their meetings, during their meetings. I've never seen that kind of energy anywhere else in AA. There have been moments that have come close, but it's just something to behold. And I love to see it. We are not a glum lot. Happy, joyous, and free. The book talks about it over and over again. And I talked before about that ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a drink. There were times when I didn't even need to take the drink yet to feel that. There were times when just walking into the liquor store, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, or just stepping into a bar, or just lifting the glass was enough to just, because I knew I was just seconds away from the solution. And I'll tell you that walking into a meeting these days, I get that exact same feeling. I could feel like I'm having the worst day in the world, and I walk into a meeting, and if you ask me how I'm doing, 9 times out of 10, I'm doing great. If I stop and think about it, I'm like, actually, no, I'm doing good. And I don't need just meetings for that. I've gotten that through phone calls. I've sat here in this exact chair in my office going absolutely insane. And in fact, it was Kyle that called me up just to ask me to, I don't know, do something. And he first asked me, he's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" And in that second, between me answering the phone and him asking the question, I was doing pretty good. I was like, I'm doing good, man. Thanks for asking. Because that's all it takes. Sometimes it just takes me getting out of myself, getting out of my own head, and getting out of the way. And honestly, that comes from doing the rest of the work. I wish it was just that simple. I've gone through periods of just going to meetings the same way that I went through periods of just trying not to drink. uh, I went through a period of just calling my sponsor, and they all worked for a while. But the only thing that I found that has seemingly brought relief, that has been unending up until it has not ended yet, is actually doing the work that is found in the steps. And I think that's because for me, it's led me to a power greater than myself. I'm no longer responsible for bearing the weight of the entire world on my shoulders. I have something greater than myself to give it to. Most of the time, that's a higher power that I like to call God. Sometimes it is just the people in these rooms, whether it's on Zoom or in person, whether it's my home group or just my committee. I don't have to do it all alone anymore. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's been an amazing experience. That's all I got. Thanks.